All right, we'll turn our attention away from jokes and stuffed animals, although joy and levity is still part of our practice, and so thank you for being here for that. This forum today will be with Meg Martin from Interfaith Works. We're very glad that she can be here with us today. Something real quick to alert everyone to is that our forums, as always, are also on Zoom and being streamed to YouTube and recorded. So you are being recorded. And there will be plenty of time for questions and answers, but even if your voice could fill this room, I'm pretty sure you're not loud enough to be heard out over the internet. So I'll bring a microphone around, and please wait for the microphone to get to you before you shout out your question. With that, we'll begin. My name is Reverend Sarah Lewis. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Community and Faith Development here at Olympia Unitarian Universalist Congregation. If you have questions later about this or any other forum, feel free to email me. My contact information is on the website. And we will begin, as we do, by lighting a chalice. These chalice lighting words are adapted from Israel Zangwill. Come into the circle of love and justice. Come into community of mercy, holiness, and health. Come, and you shall know peace and joy. And with that, I turn it over to Meg.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meg Martin. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the Director of Integrative Services for Interfaith Works. It's really nice to see some familiar faces that I've known for a very long time and new folks as well, so thanks so much for having me. It's been probably since before the pandemic, I think, that I have been here with you, so it feels great to be back. Today I am hoping to just speak a little bit to what Interfaith Works does in the community and opportunities for getting involved. But I also have been involved in homelessness response in our community for nearly 20 years at this point. So I'm happy to also speak more broadly about homelessness and affordability housing crisis that we find ourselves in, if those are any questions or discussion points that you all might have today. So how many folks here have heard of Interfaith Works before? Just about everyone in this room. A couple folks are new. That's great. Interfaith Works is a nonprofit organization in Thurston County that's 50 years old. We just had our 50th anniversary. But we are a little bit of a different structure of nonprofit. We're what's called a membership-based nonprofit, and our membership consists of 32 diverse faith and spiritual communities, including the Unitarians, but we've got representation from Christian, from Catholic, from non-denominational, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, Baha'i. It really is truly an interfaith network in our community, which is really beautiful. And we've got each of those members provides a delegate to the program council, and Tim is the delegate for the Unitarians. And then the program council meets monthly and has sort of a vision of different community projects and how we sort of want to operate in the community. So that's sort of the heartbeat, I would say, and the soul of Interfaith Works. And then our most forward-facing programs out in the community are our homeless services. And I like to think about those on a continuum of support to try to meet people wherever they are at in their experience with homelessness. And so that means that we operate a daytime drop-in center that's called Sergio's. And for those of you that have lived here for a long time, you might remember the old foam and fabric outlet on Martin Way. So we redeveloped that site just during the end of the pandemic. And we just had our 2-year anniversary of operations at Sergio's. And so the idea there is that it's a place for people to come just as they are, and access their basic needs of showers, laundry, charging stations, a place to get out of the elements during the daytime. And then we try to coordinate as many support services that people might need to operate right there out of that space. So we are able to bring people in with the very human needs daily. And then while they're there, they can meet with a primary care doctor through Valley View Health Services. And starting this month, the Providence mobile team is also going to have dedicated hours there, and they are hiring a psych nurse practitioner who's going to be able to do bridge prescription writing for people who are living with serious mental health challenges. Even if you're, by the way, an insured person housed, it can sometimes take 6 to 9 months to get a psychiatry appointment if you're trying to look for help for mental health services. So this is a much needed service. And then we've got partnerships with all different other kinds of organizations. Our local coordinated entry, which is the way that people get placed into shelter and housing, they're there each week. And then our navigators, who are sort of the Interfaith Works version of case management. That's people that we have embedded at all of our locations who have lived experience, which means own personal experience with many of the same things that people who come and access our services have gone through. So that means that they've had mental health or substance use treatment themselves, have experienced homelessness themselves or housing insecurity. And then they go through a certification process at the state, the Certified Peer Counselor Specialist training, and they are able to help connect people to different services in the community. And the idea is that if you're living on the streets or in shelters, you might be more likely to feel confident or safe to access services like medical and mental health and substance use treatment if you are there with someone who's also gone through it. And we do find that to be very true. So most folks who come to Sergio's, they are unsheltered, living in encampments, living outside. Not all, but most. And then we have our nightly, or our 24/7 shelter, which is was historically a rotating shelter that used to be here sometimes, way back when. And faith communities would host for 2 weeks at a time and provide all the volunteers, and Interfaith Works would bring the mats and the blankets and the people, and you all would provide the spaces. And then we did that for about 24 years, I would say. Many of you in this room slept on mats on the floor with people. And in 2014, we started to really see the need in our community change, and many of the volunteers were feeling like some more support was needed in order to be able to continue providing this service. So we also, at that time, it was only in the wintertime, and it was only at night, and so we had a vision to make it into a 24-hour shelter in a fixed location. So we started in the basement of First Christian Church, and then through many years of work and advocacy, we were able to partner with the Low Income Housing Institute and build a new building that's on Pattison Street and Martin Way. You may have seen it. It's called Unity Commons, and now there's 2 buildings actually. And so the one that I'm speaking about is in the back. It was the first building that was built there. And on the bottom floor is a 58-bed shelter that's 24/7. We have showers, laundry, computers, kitchen, everything that you could want. And 6 of those beds are medical respite, which means that the 2 hospitals have direct placement into those beds for people who are medically fragile and exiting the hospital, but are too fragile to go back to the streets. And then above, so that's on the bottom floor, and then above the shelter is 4 stories of permanent supportive housing. So it's leased housing, year-to-year leases for people. They pay 1/3 of their income to their rent, whatever their income is, and they are just like any rental tenants in our community. And Interfaith Works provides all of the case management, our navigators, for folks to be able to stay stably housed. And then this last couple of years, year and a half or so, we were fortunate enough with Governor Inslee's right-of-way initiative, which was targeted funding, really intentional targeted funding to close encampments that were on state right-of-ways that were kind of the most dangerous and frankly the most visible. And so he had in his last term, he really had a big dream to close as many of those encampments as possible. And many of the housing advocates was able to convince the governor's office to not do that unless people were being offered viable options to housing before the encampments were closed. And so through that initiative, we were able to purchase the old Olympia Inn, which is on 9th and Capitol, and we have converted that into leased housing as well.
There's a question online. I'm going to put it on that TV there.
Okay, great. Row, is that what helped clear the road near Providence? That was not. That was a partnership between the city of Olympia and Providence, and the city of Olympia used sort of a similar methodology, though, I would say, but they also did pay people for, I'm like trying to find the nice way to say this. They paid people for condemning their vehicles, basically, but they were trying to find places for housing for folks, which they were very successful in, especially in comparison to when encampments just close with no plan. It's usually a 0 to 10% rate of people moving into a better situation. And with the Ensign Road and with the right-of-way initiative, it was more like 75% of people. So while it's still not a perfect solution, it was much improved. But the most visible encampment that you all probably would know about that was part of the right-of-way initiative was the Hobby Lobby encampment that is now like on Sleater, Kinney, and Martin Way, I guess. That's now all those boulders instead of tents. So that's that. But many of those folks have found permanent housing with us, and so that's a really positive thing. So we do have pamphlets for all of this information out on the table. And we also do have an upcoming event for Earth Day that the Program Council is spearheading. And so it's going to be very cool. And there's going to be opportunities for hands-on service to care for the land and really good speakers. And that's at the Lincoln Garden Elementary School. And there is going to be Indigenous speakers there as part of it as well. So I have a flyer for that. And then also, we have a monthly volunteer training that's every second Saturday of the month from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Walk-ins are encouraged. You don't have to RSVP ahead of time. And we do have volunteer opportunities at Unity Commons as well as Sergio's. And we hold the contract with the county for hazardous weather response. So you may have heard sometimes the term code blue, or when there's a snowstorm, we convert Sergio's into like 100 cots in there, and we open up for overnight shelter when it's really, really cold out. And this last winter, we had almost a 2-week stretch that was very cold, and we were seeing upwards of 85 to 95 people per night. So that's in addition to all the shelters being full and all that. So if you come to the volunteer training, you are eligible and on the list for when there is a code blue or an emergency weather response. And that's actually one of the best ways, I think, to get a real sense of like what people are going through in our community night to night. So yeah, Also, it's just amazing information about homelessness in our community, about how to talk with people who are living with substance use challenges and mental health challenges. And so it's just a really good education opportunity. And we don't, make you sign up for volunteer trainings or anything for going. So know that that's a resource that's available to you as well. Finally, I always try to center back into why we're here. And so this is probably hard for everybody to see. We can pass it around a little bit. But you may notice that with the exception of Unity Commons, our facilities have names attached with them. And so Sergio's, some of you in this room knew Sergio. It's right there. And Sergio was just like the life of the party, I guess you could say. Just really a very charismatic, beautiful kind of man of mystery in a lot of ways. An amazing musician. Every year that we have our Up and Smoke barbecue, he would always play his guitar at the open mic, and his favorite band was the Beatles, and he would always cover Beatles songs. And just really funny and loving and fiery. He'd get mad. And, he had like this whole shoe and belt collection in the shelter that we always had to help him pare down. But he got frostbite on one of his feet in, I've been doing this so long now, I'm like 10 years ago, I don't know. But it ended up progressing slowly by slowly, and he would lose toes, and then he lost his foot, and then he got it on his other foot, and he had other underlying health conditions that were contributing to that. And so we slowly watched, and also part of Sergio's story is that he was undocumented, and so there was very little resources that he could actually qualify for because he couldn't provide the documentation that was required to do that. And so we essentially watched over a period of, in my time, over a period of like 8 years, but it started before that, him slowly, literally losing limb after limb after limb until he passed away. And so when we opened the day center, we knew that that would be one of the only places that Sergio would have been allowed to be and to just be free and to get the care that he needed and not have to prove that. So I want to bring him in with us here today. And then Sandy at Sandy's Flats, Sandy Betts, she was another fabulous character who you all will have plenty of opportunities if you volunteer with us to see all of our personality that we have. But Sandy was another fabulous character, woman in her 60s who had really severe mental health challenges that she just could not quite get a handle on at times. And she ended up, after staying with the shelter for many years, she ended up passing away at Sandy's. She was there one night just trying to get a break from the shelter, and she had a major medical event that occurred. But Sandy used to, I'll never forget, you knew that she was at the shelter because she had red hair dye just all over the sinks and staining all the sinks at First Christian, and we were like, oh no, Sandy. So it's really important to me to always just remember why we're here, who we're here for, and I really appreciate you all taking the time. Are there any questions or thoughts that folks have?
Can you tell me the difference between Unity Commons and the new building? I haven't quite figured that out.
Yeah, so basically the setup at that space is that in order to build buildings like that, organizations have to have a lot of financial infrastructure and capacity. So that's why this kind of arranged marriage between the Low Income Housing Institute and Interfaith Works happened for Unity Commons. So the city sold them that property with a restriction basically on the property that they partner with us for development and operations of Unity Commons. But they technically own the building and they own the property. We just have a 38-year commercial lease with them for the bottom floor, and then the contract for providing case management services. So the Lotus building, it's called Lotus Court, that is 65 apartments of permanent supportive housing for seniors, so 55 and up, and that's owned and fully operated by Lehigh. So they didn't have that same restriction with the city for the second building. But a lot of our shelter guests got housed there, and so it's, we're all still a little family every day on the campus.
Thanks for coming today. I have two questions. One was about the types of volunteers you need that aren't people with lived experience or expertise in the area. So I'm guessing it's everything from janitorial to all kinds of things, but would love to hear more about that. I have a graduating senior and
Awesome.
would like to get involved. And my other question is about funding sources for you and whether any of those are endangered right now that you're aware of. I know there's a lot of uncertainty, but just wondering what we should be aware of on that end. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we have volunteer opportunities in many different ways, and it's absolutely not a requirement for you to have had that lived experience in order to volunteer with us. But there's set shifts at the day center, and that does look like, a lot of times it looks like organizing our donation room, to be honest, because it's just a big job that's always, there's more to it. But just kind of, a lot of the role of the volunteers is to be able to have the space to just meet people and be with people, because a lot of times the staff are really busy operating the space or being first to respond if there's like an escalation or a medical event. And so having the volunteer be able to just kind of be hanging out with people is a really, really important role. And so that can look like doing art, it can look like helping serving food, it can look like helping in the garden. We have raised garden beds at Unity Commons that always we need help with. Cleaning up, organizing, just meeting people, and kind of whatever the staff are needing that day, the volunteer can help with during their shift. During Code Blue, we have opening and closing shifts and that's a lot more, especially with the closing shift, that's a lot more janitorial, like helping folks get out the door, clean up, sweep, mop. In the evenings, it looks more like setting up the cots and just sort of setting up the space, and then being there, sometimes going with staff on rounds around the building, things like that. Also, and this is another way that that OUUC has participated for a very long time, is that we have organizations and church groups that provide meals to us every month. And Joanne could speak more to the process that you all use at OUUC, but I'm sure that there would be opportunities to help make food and bring that as well with the monthly group that you all have already. So.
How many people already knew that we twice a month provide dinner? Whoops. How many people that are present today know that twice a month we provide dinner at the Unity Commons we aim for the 53 people that, is that right, the right number? And I need some
There's
new
a few more than that,
helpers.
but that's
So
okay. Yeah.
my name's Joanne Young.
Yeah, and you all have been doing that for 10 years. I mean, at least at the shelter 10 years, but before that.
We followed the other shelters.
Mm-hmm.
Right away.
Yeah.
Another question.
What's the biggest misconception about homelessness or unhoused people you wish could be corrected?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I'm going to pause it for 1 second because I forgot that there was a second part of this person's question. Oh, no, no, you're totally good. The second part of your question that I forgot. So we don't have a ton of direct federal money that we receive, although it has sparked a lot of discussion because, in our mission statement, social justice and peace through interfaith understanding, there's every word on the woke bad word list or whatever that went out is, how we operate all the time. And so I think that there's definitely a lot of discussion around what that might look like. My bigger concern is not, My bigger concern is just the general backslide, and this actually goes into your question that you just asked, is this kind of ideological shift away from the fact that when people have their basic needs met first, like shelter, like housing, like hygiene and food, without any restrictions for receiving that, they are exponentially more likely to be successful in pursuing mental health services, substance use treatment, getting sober, all of those things, getting medical care, being less reliant on emergency rooms and law enforcement and very expensive medical interventions. So that's the model that we've operated from for a very long time. And we are hearing that there's going to be an explicit shift from that to a place where people need to, like, have to require them to do treatment or have much more of a law enforcement and criminality element to the experience of homelessness. And there's a lot of messaging about how just giving, like, it's like that fundamental shift away from this is a societal issue surrounding poverty versus this is an individual failure of a bad person. It's going that way, yes. And so I think there's a lot of this funding stream or that funding stream, or could this get cut or could that get cut? But my concern more is that I think there is a hunger for people to, people feeling wronged by people that they perceive as other than them. And in our community, the most visible folks who are struggling are also the least positioned to better their situation. But I'm making an assumption here. I would say the majority of us in this room have the luxury of having our mental breakdowns inside four walls, of fighting with our partners in the privacy of our own home, of being able to close the door when we're going to the bathroom or taking a shower, being able to have garbage pickup once a week at our house. So what I hear a lot in terms of misconceptions are really around, really rooted, I think, in that visibility. And it's and I think a lot about, it should make us all very uncomfortable to drive downtown or to drive by the jungle or whatever and see people who are living with so little in the wealthiest country in the world. Well, maybe not anymore, but from the last couple weeks. But so I really, I think that the biggest misconception is this, and sometimes it's conscious and sometimes it's very subconscious, but this idea that when you have to walk over someone in a doorway or walk by someone in a doorway, that it is somehow something that they did that put them there, rather than a societal condition that we live in that is putting people in those doorways. Yeah.
Okay, we've got two more in the room who had their hands up, and then I'll get to, so here to Darlene first.
Thank you. I've been living in Olympia for about 30 years and involved off and on again with my unhoused neighbors. I worked for Department of Commerce for about a decade.
Awesome.
And one of the things that really struck me, especially right after COVID, but also sort of when people start to get stressed out, when they start to feel stressed out, we sort of see these increases in violence to our unhoused neighbors. You know, I've talked to homeless people who've had eggs thrown on them, who've had people throw their Pepsis on them. I've had somebody got out of their car and punched them in the face,
Yep.
took out 2 of their teeth. I mean, these are people just trying to live.
Yep.
Have we ever, and this is something I've thought about for a while, have we ever thought about, like, what can we do to kind of like, that is a hate crime. I mean, but they're not a protected class for hate crime. Have we thought about like what we can do about that, and what we can also do to kind of make that less acceptable? It shouldn't be acceptable at all.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, I think that, I guess, no, and we should. I think there are those of us that have been saying that kind of thing for a long time, have been witnessing that kind of thing. The same thing happens with garbage dumping at encampments. I can't tell you, if you went and hung out at the jungle for 6 hours, there would be someone in a construction truck or just somebody in whatever, and they are throwing garbage. I have a piece of property kind of around that is owned with a couple of different neighbors, and we have people coming just throwing tires, throwing whatever, because they don't want to pay for dump fees. So there has been a question about, do we do some sort of dump subsidy program for people in the community who are housed, so that they don't feel like they have to go throw trash at homeless encampments, and then the rest of the community thinks like, wow, how can they have so much trash accumulating if they're homeless? They and so there is some of that conversation that happens, but I think that we really struggle in this country, whether it comes to frequent gun violence or anything. We really struggle to grasp the idea and the fact that has been proven time and time again, that people with severe mental illness, people with severe substance use challenges are far more likely to be victims of violence than to be perpetrators of violence. Now, does that mean that it never happens? No. It has happened before, right? Or violence with people in the same community has happened before. But in all of my 20 years experience doing this, what I have found over and over again is that nothing is quite as it seems when you take one tiny snapshot of it. And so when you ask a little bit of a follow-up question, you can see where people are just trying to make the best of a situation. They're making the best choice in that situation, but the choices that they have are horrible choices that are available to them. And so I think there could be a lot more that could be done with that. And that's part of my greater concern, again, of that like fundamental shift towards people are criminals, people are drug addicts, people are felons, and people are dangerous. And that is a really scary place for our community to go, not only for the people that are experiencing homelessness, but also because we've tried that before. And what it results in is huge amount of waste of taxpayer dollars for emergency services and jail time. And it causes just all kinds of different suffering. And I can go down that road, but it's like we've already tried all that and it didn't work. And that's why we came to this other sort of perspective. And so I hope that we don't backslide too far.
Thanks. I think this kind of builds on what you just said, and then my earlier question about funding. So wondering about more like state and local funding sources and the shift away from low or no barrier housing or services. Are you seeing that at the local and state level, or does it feel like just something in the zeitgeist? I mean, just wondering where it would be helpful for us to put pressure into education.
Yeah. So we aren't seeing that. We're seeing it a little bit at the state level, I will say. But it's always been a little bit at the state level. The sort of the arguing with whether this way of housing first is the best practice that is kind of the umbrella for all of this stuff that I'm talking about. So there's been articles about the mismanagement of funds and housing first programs and things like that in Washington state. There's been a lot of those sort of journalistic exposés that to try to show that it's somehow an exploitive or ineffective model. But the body of peer-reviewed evidence that exists is like decades and decades and decades long at this point, and so that for it to be an effective way. So I think the state fundamentally understands that. I think the Department of Commerce definitely fundamentally understands that. I think the Office of Homeless Youth at the state understands it better than just about anyone at the state level. And we still, like, even in the funding round for the county this year, there's a requirement that is in the grant application for any grantees that you have to explicitly discuss your DEI practices as an organization and how you are addressing racism in the homeless response. So, and you get points for your answers on that. So that's all still very embedded locally and at the state level. But yeah, there's always kind of a pressure. I mean, the biggest way that I think it's showed itself this legislative session was through the rent stabilization bill that was trying to get passed. And so there's definitely conflict there. But overall, I don't see that shift taking hold in Washington state as much as I do other places. Mm-hmm.
And a quick pause. Is there anyone online that we should be hearing from? Okay, good. Anything else in the room or online?
Well, I just want to shout out Joanne and the late, great Billy, because you really have been just here all along, and Tim, to others in the room. Like, it's just like really amazing to have gotten to be working with all of you for so long in this kind of quest for humanity that I think we're all trying to share in our different ways. So thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. So with that, we'll close our forum. I'll extinguish our chalice. May this flame of our hopes and our dreams for all live on in our hearts and in the way that we show up in the world.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks.